Introduce you all to a man who has dedicated his life to the study and dissemination of Indic ideas. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ram Sharma, the Director of Center for Indic Studies at Indus University, Ahmedabad. Ram Sharma ji has an impressive academic background, holding a doctorate in linguistics and double postgraduate degrees in management and literature. He has designed and taught courses on Indian knowledge systems, language systems, and philosophy, demonstrating a deep understanding of the rich cultural heritage of India. And since 2004, Ram Sharma ji has been devoted to explaining various facets of Indic issues and studies. He is credited with starting the trend of recording talks on Indic issues while working as a secretary of India Inspires Foundation. As the director of the Center for Indic Studies, he is responsible for channelizing ideas and providing creative direction to achieve the center's goals. Moreover, Ram Sharma ji is the curator of the Dharma versus Religion project, which seeks to explore the differences between the two concepts and their impacts on society. His dedication and expertise have made him a leading author on Indic studies. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ram Sharma. And to introduce the in-house faculty, I'm delighted to introduce you all to Mr. Harikrishnan Venugopal sir, a faculty associate at Amrita School of Spiritual and Cultural Studies, Amritapuri campus. Harikrishnan sir holds a degree in electronic and communication engineering and has over 9 years of experience in the industry and research. However, his academic interests extend beyond his field of study, as he has a keen interest in civilization studies, comparative religion, and cultural history of the world. He has been researching, writing, and presenting papers on these topics for the past 7 years and has also written articles and delivered lectures online. Sir has coordinated several workshops in these areas for students and faculty members of the campus. Harikrishnan sir's passion for these subjects has led him to serve as an editor, and he has worked on 3 books with the School of Cultural and Spiritual Studies. Currently, he is focusing on learning Sanskrit and researching the impact of cultural rootedness in scientific thinking. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Harikrishnan Venugopal, whose wealth of knowledge and expertise in the field of cultural and spiritual studies is sure to enlighten us all. So please give them a warm and enthusiastic welcome, and as they take on the stage.
Thank you, Bharati, for those kind words.
So we'll begin, and in the previous dialogue also, I think here and there they talked about colonization and the problem of colonization, right? And so you find that in every aspect you study, every aspect of Indic or civilizational study you make, you find this problem of colonization affecting the study, affecting the research per se. And finally, when somebody tries to find out the truth behind things, they are not satisfied, or they are not finding that it is truthful or fundamental. So today in this dialogue, we try to cover from the very basic sense, what is this problem that we are facing, and today we have the opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth itself. So I will ask some questions to sir, and in the end you can also participate, and we'll start with the very basic. So I think any graduate from Amrita University will at least attend, as of now we hope to increase, but at least as of now they will at least attend 1 or 2 lectures on colonization and colonial consciousness and decolonization. So probably many of them will know, but still, assuming that they are not at all familiar with what is colonization and what is the problem we are talking about here. So to address that, can you fundamentally define colonization and why is it a problem?
Okay, so colonization, historically, socially, collectively, I'll come to explain in a few minutes. Because to understand any concept, you have to understand how individually or psychologically it affects you at individual level. So let me ask questions to you here. Okay, what is the most cherished thing what is the most important quality that you cherish in you? Okay, or what is the most important thing that you don't want to negotiate or compromise with in you at individual level? Of course, we change dresses regularly, so it's not that we get a stick to one dress and will not compromise anything with that. We keep continuously changing our dresses. we keep changing over the period, our appearances also. The hair grows and we have different styles and all that. So what I'm asking to you right now is, and please help me to explore this individually, because the amplification of that individual thing can be understood at the collective level as colonization. So what is the most important thing that you have that you don't want to anyone to be snatched away from you? Anyone? Freedom. Okay. What more? Any student? Let's say I'm not talking about any age right now. I'm not saying that you are in this class and can you go without that thing. I'm asking across the ages or across your whole lifetime, what is one thing that you cherish most in you? That you don't want anyone to interfere and disturb that. Of course, you are closer when you are saying freedom. But even deeper than freedom, there is one more thing. Any guesses? Any guesses would be fine. Self-respect. Okay. Privacy. Rights. Okay. So self-respect means something we have to do with self. And then the respect will come. Okay. So understand that there are two words. Okay. And maybe while exploring we can come closer to that. Look, I am professor, so I will not allow you to sit very silently. I will interact and I will not give speeches right now. I will come to the point later on. But I would like to see. So you are closer. Anyone else? Now back seat. Something? Peace. Okay, that could be one option. Okay. Originality. Yes. And where does it come from? Okay, so let's see what you are saying is then when freedom or rights or self-respect, so I see it that way. That the most important thing is your identity, that you think that you are that person. Suppose if I am saying I am Ram Sharma, so that identity is there, which I call Ram or Ram Sharma and associate everything with that. Do you agree with that? Suppose if I take away your name, what will happen? Will you allow me to take away your name? Will you allow me? Okay, just go deeper now. Where does that identity come from? Suppose if I ask you who you are, then what do you say? How do you start, let's say, introducing yourself? Because when I say who you are, I'm asking you who you are as a person. What's your identity? Right? When we first meet and greet each other, when we try to explore each other, I would like to know more about you as person. As person means as an individual identity. What are the components that create that individual identity? How do you begin? Of course, naming is first thing. So you have that label. Okay, what more? Okay, let's say nationality is one part. But let's not go too big for now. Let's have simple things at first. Basics are there. Okay, so your expertise area means your natural inclination or the work that you do. So that work decides who you are. Okay, what more? This is something related to campus placement question. Because the first thing that interviewer is going to ask you is, tell me something about yourself. And this is the most, difficult question to answer. Because it all boils down to how do we define ourselves. And to define oneself, what are the factors involved? First you tell that what you are doing. Okay. But that doing is also dependent on where you have come from. And then there are values also associated with that. You also tell that I like this, I don't like this. You tell that I value this in life and I don't value this in life. Am I right? Am I making sense? Okay. So when you identify yourself as a person, there are multiple things involved. First is your name, then where you come from. Where you come from means what is the origin of that. Then your memory. Suppose if I take away your memory, can you tell me something about yourself? Suppose if there through artificial mechanism, if I take away that memory from you, will you allow me? Why? Because that's the part of your core identity. So what we are seeing here is that, of course, I can trade many things. If I possess any object, if I can give and take something. But what I cannot give and take is my core identity. If you cannot allow your core identity to be snatched away, to be manipulated, to be controlled by other, then do you think you will allow that to collectively happen as a society? So that manipulation of individual identity, we easily diagnose through psychological text. But what happens when the whole society is under attack through some mechanism, and that mechanism involved various things, taking away your memory. And here collectively memory is what? Your tradition. Because your tradition and your history, let's say, define collectively who you are. Then what is defined? Then your values are there. Then your naming is there. Then where you are originated. Okay. So these are all fundamental things that any colonized enterprise would like to indulge in. So when you asked me about what is colonization, collectively colonization is hijacking of your identity, of your collective identity, by manipulating your past, history, your culture, your philosophy to have something more sinister as an agenda and to manipulate you according to the goal that colonizer have in mind. If you cannot allow that you to happen individually, how we can allow that to happen collectively? That is the exploration I think we are going to do.
Yes. So the next fundamental question before we go into the more pressing matters is to maybe alongside this, how would you, so the name of the dialogue is Decolonizing Indian Education. So first we have to get familiar with what decolonization means. So now you heard what colonization is. So can you, in a very basic sense, for a person who's,
I think now you can all answer what decolonization would be. I think decolonization would be to come back to your true identity. Taking away what is snatched from you, let's say secretly, mysteriously, subconsciously. So that's why I said yesterday also, colonization is whatever taking you away from your true nature, prakriti, or self. Suppose if you are a musician and you're really, extremely engrossed in that area, you will not feel happy if you pursue any other path. So when I say that I'm taking you away from your core identity or core areas, you will feel disturbed. You will feel unpleasant. You will feel that someone or something is interfering in your life. So the decolonization is bringing that true self, true nature, and your true identity in your own control as per your inclinations and temperament. So this is how psychologically I look at colonization and decolonization. Few aspects I will talk later on.
Yeah. So you heard what colonization and decolonization is, right? So now maybe with that fundamental we can move on. And the dialogue that we have planned here is decolonization of Indian education, right? So sir was talking about colonization of the mind and decolonizing. So something about your identity that is snatched away and something about it that is to be brought back, right? So when you talk about decolonizing Indian education, So all of these students who are here, we can generally say, so when we teach them and when we try to impart them with our classes and lectures and all, or the topics that, of the kind that were in the book that we just published, we find one thing is that, they've been with their parents at their home and they've come directly from there to the university. So their raw experience, they have not started. So every experience is filtered by their parents or teachers. So they are just beginning out in their life. They are going to set out in their life. But in regards to education, all of them are first-hand experiences of what the education in India is like. 14 or 15 years, they have been gone through such an education. So what about this education is colonized? What is to be decolonized? Or before going to that, what about the education in India is colonized, and how do you explain colonization there?
Now the roots of colonization goes very deep in India. But I'd like to again ask you one question. Which society on this planet has completely decolonized itself over the, let's say last 2000 years? Just forget about India right now. Okay. And then you will realize the importance of India if you just do the global survey. Which society was colonized at one point of time, but gradually it came out of that colonization and started decolonizing itself? What about, let's start with North America and South America. Do you think? Why? Think hard. Could North American people can decolonize themselves? You know about the genocide of Native Americans? Okay, the massacre that happened. So no longer, of course, there are minuscule percentage of Native Americans now living. And they are not powerful enough, even the demography is not in their favor, so they cannot go through the process of decolonization. Even fundamental rights are not there. So let me tell you and share this one thing with you, and you'll understand the intensity of colonization, how far it can go, and you'll understand how gradually it happened in India. Because if the slow poison is given, you will not notice it, because it will happen unconsciously and subconsciously. But if the hard poison is given, you will recognize it easily. So here is, National Geographic, one article is here, and let me read this out to you. Government boarding schools once separated Native Americans' children from families. So, you might have heard this phrase, white man's burden. Okay? This is about, the civilizing mission that white people undertook, and they decided that all other parts of the globe people are uncivilized, barbaric, savages, and we are the one who are civilized, and it's our responsibility to civilize all these people on the earth. So when Native Americans, after the huge extermination was done, massacre, killing, and I think 80% people were killed. Just imagine, 20% were left. Those 20%, they wanted to continue with their indigenous education system, their language, their own way of looking at the nature and the reality and all that. But white man's burden or this colonization did not allow them. What did they say? They said that this is, there are a lot of books written on that. So they opened up a school. They forcibly took away children from their parents and never allowed those children to meet their parents again. Because their parents were savages, barbaric, primitive, and these children had to be educated in civilized mode. So they cannot use their own native languages. This they did across America. Hundreds of schools were opened, and no traditional knowledge system were allowed to be taught in those schools. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that this is a part of colonized history of white man's burden, civilizing mission? So I'll read this. At boarding schools, staff forced indigenous students to cut their hair and use new Anglo-American names. Even names were changed. Now think about the original definition I was giving about colonization and identity. They forbid children from speaking their native language and observing their religious and cultural practices. And by removing them from their homes, the schools disrupted students' relationship with their families and other members of their tribe. Once they returned home, children struggled to relate to their families after being taught that it was wrong to speak their language or practice their religion. This is what I call collective manipulation of mind, collective hijacking of your identity, and name of that you'll make them more civilized. Why I quoted this? Not to only talk about the history of Native Americans. Do you see any relation between the Native American history and what has been happening in India for last 150 years? Do you see any similarity? Can you make any comparison here? Of course, such kind of extreme measures they could not take in India. That forcibly taking kids from their parents and sending them to boarding schools, never allowing them to meet. I think such thing never happened in few places here and there we can say, but collectively it could not happen. But it happened gradually. You just look at the India's education journey in the last 150 years. What happens when students come out of their schools and colleges? First thing that they come to realize, even Swami Vivekananda, explicitly mentioned that you begin to hate your tradition, your past. Even you begin to feel somewhat inferior about your parents. You feel that they don't know English. Maybe they don't know, the English terminology or the Western framework. They don't have accent like you when you speak. In fact, we have seen generation which was shying away from introducing their parents to their friends also. We have seen that in urban areas. Isn't it looking familiar to what happened to Native Americans? Of course, there it happened only in the span of 20, 25, 30 years. But here, it is stretched over 100 years. And because it happened so gradually that we are no longer noticing what's happening. Aren't we are told that our languages are primitive in nature? You are backward if you are speaking your mother tongue. I really apologize because I'm speaking in English here about all these things. In ideal situation, I would have been speaking in Sanskrit because that was the lingua franca of our, across India, or maybe the regional language. But let's try to understand what happened. So you begin to curse your tradition, you begin to curse your family, you begin to curse your surroundings because you think now you are civilized and all others surrounding you are uncivilized and they need to be civilized in this mission of colonized education. So when you are asking me India's education journey, you look at where it began, where first of all we were not allowed to have our gurukulams to survive in India. And this is survey done by British themselves when they came here and which was later on published by the great historian Dharampal ji, that when British people came here, we had only in Bengal province, there were 4 provinces or 5 provinces at that time, and they did survey of education in India. Why they did survey of education in India? Not because they would like to give us more education. Of course, there was one school also who was also promoting that they should be given education in their own mother tongue or their tradition. But the other school prevailed and they started promoting English education system. That's the later story. But the earlier story is they did survey because they wanted to prove that India never had robust education system. So their idea of colonized framework was these Indians are barbaric, primitive, superstitious, and they never believed in this education system and never passed on education from one generation to another. So surprisingly, when they did survey across India, they found that 1 lakh small gurukuls were running only in Bengal province. You knew about this fact? If 1 lakh is in only one province, just think about the 4 or 5 provinces that were divided. Because it was shock to them also that such kind of vast education network already exists in India. But still, rather than allowing these Gurukulam to flourish and to go ahead with whatever modern requirements would be there, okay, for mass education, they allow them to gradually perish because they thought that these Gurukulams are worthless and they cannot impart modern education system. And the remaining story is that we inherited this English education system and we inherited the whole Western colonial framework, which I'll be talking about, but you need to understand where it begins. One more point that I would like to talk about is, in connection to this, when we talk about colonization, which colonizing force comes into your mind? Which colonial empire comes in your mind? So let's do the stock taking here and let's understand the whole picture. How many colonizer in the last 100 or let's say last 5 to 600 or 1000 years came to India? Because whenever we use the word colonization, it's only the British we think that they colonized us. And okay, if I ask you what's the difference between invasion and colonization? Can colonization happen without invasion? Or can invasion happen without colonization? So think over these things. So let me tell you that 3 waves of colonization happened in India. The first wave of colonization came with British as the second wave. Okay. The first wave was? No. Portuguese is like, the wave of European colonization which began from 16th, 17th century all over the globe. Previous to that I'm talking about. Because once we need to decolonize ourselves, we need to understand how many forces and how many layers of colonization we have inherited. Because if the diagnosis is not proper, then whatever I will be saying about decolonization will remain impartial or incomplete. The first was the Islamic invasion wave that come, which brought, the temple destruction, which brought, when I think Shivanandanji was talking about that the, Nalanda, Takshila, all great centers of learning, where they are today, what happened to them? They're all destroyed, burned by Islamic invaders. So that colonization was the first wave of colonization to India. Do you see any impact of that colonization still today? I'm talking about behavior, not burning. Of course, that list is very long. That how many temples they destroyed or how many learning centers they destroyed. So I'll tell you one example of that. So if you go to North India as compared to South India, I'm telling you that marriages used to happen during daytime across India. But nowadays, if you travel across North India, you will find that as contrast to Southern India, that marriages are happening in the night. Have you noticed that? Okay, when does marriage happen here in Southern India? During daytime or during night time? Daytime. Why that shift happened? Because the Islamic invaders, whenever they see that any marriage ceremony is taking place, they will invade that place, they will take away the bride, okay, and disrupt the whole ceremony. And the repeated experience of that invasion and taking away bride from that marriage ceremony was not once or twice, it was common experience across North India. That's why, due to what we call apad kal dharam, the marriages used to happen during night time, because you could see invaders from far away when they are coming in the night, and you can easily escape from there. So that colonized practices still exist, and the parda system that we see in North India is because of that invasion. So, first is this. Second is the British colonization. And what impact we are seeing? Of course, we are going to thoroughly discuss that. But let me give you one example here. Every society, organically, naturally, align its annual cycle with season only. This is something that evolution has taught us. This is something that we have naturally learned. Even animal instinct is like this. Even plant instincts are like that. But look what happened after the British colonization when we are celebrating our New Year. It's not, we should not celebrate because it is Western or it is given to us by British. Do you see any astronomical phenomena that happens on 1st of January? Do you see any natural phenomena that happens on 1st of January? That is the most unscientific calendar built anywhere in the world. It is not because the British gave us that calendar and because of hatred we should not follow it. Because that has never been the dharmic approach. If the best practices are coming, we'll adopt it. And look at when our schools are opening. Look at when they are closing. Even the whole cycle is determined by British when they came here. We are opening up our school at the worst time when the whole country is flooding. During monsoon time. That was the time when people would stay at home. Of course, there was katha, pravachan, parampara, all satsang would happen. But I don't have actual fact right now in front of me. But I am guessing that this was not the time when ancient Gurukula system was opening up. So third is. And the third colonization. Third colonization you can talk about? Any guesses? First is, second is I've shared with you. When did third colonization happen? So British left in 1947, so what's left now? Do you notice any colonization happened after that also? That colonization is visible in our economic policy more as compared to, let's say, our day-to-day behavior. Now you're getting hint. How many of you are from management, economy or this branch? Okay. All of you are from sciences? Even not sciences?
Yeah, I think CSC and chemistry. Right?
So the third colonization happened from, let's say, 1950s or 60s onwards, when communists began to have total control over our academia. And this is important to understand. Because I found it strange when I was your age and when this colonization topic came again and again. I could not make sense that even after 70 years, 60 years, 75 years, we are still discussing because British left us 75 years ago. Who's there to control our mind now? So why we could not decolonize ourselves in 75 years? You will not understand the whole history if you will not go through what happened from 1950s or 60s to 1991. So I'll give you one marker for that. In 1991, one big economic change happened. Are you aware of that? Okay. So the thing is that we opened up our market. That is known as liberalization, privatization and globalization. So in 1991, we adopted the economic policy of free market. So it means that something previous to 91 was not about free market. So it was all about socialism and communism. And what happened is that the policy that we adopted, we became bankrupt in 1991. I'm talking about India as a country became bankrupt, almost at the verge of bankruptcy in 1991, because we did not have enough money to import oil for 15 days. Now this chapter of Indian economic history is never systematically taught in our textbook. Because those who write textbooks, they are responsible. I'm talking about the earlier people. They are responsible for such disastrous economic policy. So the third colonization and third wave of colonization, you need to understand, it happened when we got freedom, when we did not have physical invasion. But this idea of communism and socialism creeped in, brought by people who had vested interest in this, and they hijacked, our academia totally, completely. So these three waves need to be taken into account when we are talking about decolonizing India's education system, because all three of them have deeply impacted our behavior, our practices, and our education system in totality. So now I can talk about decolonizing, right?
Yeah, but before, so that explains. So that was my another question that I wanted to ask you. So this year we are actually celebrating or enjoying the 76th year of independence, right? So we are 76 this year, and we are still talking about decolonizing Indian education, right? So this explains why that was. And before going into decolonizing Indian education, I wanted to ask you one more question. Do we need to think about decolonization as a solution per se?
Is it important?
Is it important? And the counter question is, why not just study the education framework that is there in the US or in the UK that is non-colonized? So we are talking about a colonized education and decolonizing it, but we have a state-of-the-art, so-called state-of-the-art education in the US and UK today. Why not just study a couple of the developed countries and the education system there and try to implement that here? Wouldn't that be another solution that we can take up?
No, that should be taken up, because whatever the best practices are there, let's say whether it's in the system of US or Japan or China or let's say Africa or let's say in America, that's what true exploration is all about. But remember, this is when you are free and not colonized. Only then you have that potential and that confidence of going out, exploring things, evaluating things, and bringing out best things. When you are colonized, you will think that everything that India is giving to you is first of all inferior, subgraded. How will you evaluate what is the best and what is the worst? There are a lot of practices which were included in education system which turned out to be worst. That happened all the time. So the thing is, if with real confidence, with your real identity exploration, with uncolonized framework, if you go out and learn from the world, then the world will also appreciate you and will have an equal exchanges will be taking place. But colonization in India has not allowed this true exploration to happen. Okay. Now, if you tell me that we should not allow our own practices to grow, flourish, and to be identified and just to copy the West, that will be the most damaging thing that we are going to do. And that's what we are doing right now. You take any textbook. I give this example when I talk about Indian knowledge system. I give example, okay, let me quote one more. You rightly reminded me about this. Okay, this is Time Magazine edition of May 2022. Okay, let me read out the headings of this. And you'll understand why we cannot copy, blindly imitate the models given by West to us. And this is coming from the West. This is one of the prestigious magazine in the West. And this is what they are talking about India and giving advice to India now. Western architecture is making India's heat waves worse. Who's writing? The Westerner is writing. What he is saying? That Western architecture is making India's heat waves worse. Okay, so let me read out the first two paragraphs and you will understand the intensity with which he is writing. Benny Kuriakose remembers when his father built the first house in his village in the southern Indian state of Kerala. Now this is a story from Kerala only. with a concrete roof. It was 1968 and the family was proud to use the material, he says, which was becoming a status symbol among villagers. Hope you are getting this? Okay. The new home resembled the modern building cropping up in Indian cities, which in turn resembled those in the images of the Western cities. But inside the house was sweltering. The solid concrete absorbed heat throughout the day and radiated it inside at night. Meanwhile, neighboring thatched roofed houses stayed cool. Let me repeat this again. And meanwhile, neighboring thatch roofed houses stayed cool. The air trapped between gaps in the thatch was a poor conductor of heat. And he goes on explaining that this blind imitation of Western architectural model, how it is playing role in global warming and let's say local warming or global warming in India. After 75 years of independence, someone in the Western country in the prestigious magazine writes this. How do we understand this? So what literally he is saying is that in your architectural curriculum, I'll come to other subjects also, what you need to incorporate is the vernacular model, the indigenous model of architecture. Now you'll say, what's the great thing about it? We must be teaching this. But if you go and take a look at the architecture, the complete semester-wise, subject-wise, the list of the subjects that they are teaching. 4 semesters, 4 years, 8 semesters. 8 semesters, in each semester you have around 8 subjects, or maybe 7, 8 subjects. It means around 60 subjects they are teaching. None of them, not single module is there in that architecture college or the syllabus which talk about how Indians build cities, how Indians build houses, how Indians came up with the solution when it comes to space, the creation of a space. And that's what I call the total colonization of Indian education. You look at the management subject. 3 plus 2, 5 years in management, 10 semesters. Again, 6, 7 subjects in each semester. Just tell me one module which talk about Indic model of business, economy and management. In fact, our students have never heard of whether there is any indigenous model existing in India that can talk about economic framework or business framework or management framework. And this is the real problem, because just think it pragmatically, practically. Forget about the high ideals of nationalism and all those things, because those are sometimes very abstract words in which we cannot comprehend. Suppose Indian students are going to American university, where students are coming from China, Japan, France, Germany and all over the places. Suppose you are all sitting together at one place. And if they ask you suddenly, let's say, because all kind of discussions are taking place, okay, you tell me about, Indian philosophy. And these are the real cases that when they are asked, they even look here and there and they call their teacher back to India. Does sir, any kind of philosophy exist in India? When they ask about, okay, what's your architectural framework? How you have viewed space? Look, architectural subtleties or the details can come out later. But how do you view space? How do you view beauty? That is the first question you will be asking when you are designing something in space. Indian students, because they are hardly trained in all these areas, when they go on global platform, they have no single idea related to their own tradition, indigenous knowledge system that they can share on global platform. And that's why the inferiority complex goes much deeper. And we begin to think that all discoveries, inventions, all kind of findings are always done by Westerners. You look at the textbook around yourself. Whether you read the science textbook or humanities textbook, very few, I think even not 1% of any findings are attributed to any Indian writer. So, to decolonize India's education system, we need to understand how deeper that colonized framework has gone into our academic curriculum. Even to ask for integrating one module of indigenous knowledge system into our curriculum are taken up as, is taken up as something that we are distorting the whole education system. Communal forces have come up and they would like to take us back to, orthodoxy and to the Vedic period and whatnot. So this is what the reality is. So suppose if I ask you, in last 50 years, in terms of ideas, innovations and discoveries, where India has contributed most? Or whether we have any original contribution or not?
I can extend. So you're talking about Indians outside, right?
Even
so naturally,
yes.
the students may be thinking about the successful so-called Indians outside, like Sundar Pichai,
But
or the British Prime Minister
Right.
today, or many Indians going out and becoming very successful. What about them?
So I think we discussed this also. So the thing is, we take pride when any Indian get to the prominent position, and that's matter of pride for all of us, because even that matters to all of us. Till 20 years back, we were shown as something that we are not entrepreneurs. We can never successfully run businesses. We can never grow economically. Even in 70s and 80s, 1970s and 80s, what was the economic growth rate was called? When it was only 2%, 1%, 3%, due to socialist and communist policy. Okay, let me elaborate on that. Socialist and communist policy means, because you're all new and you might not be aware of the history. Suppose if I have to build scooters today, or maybe motorbikes, or maybe car, what I will look at? I'll look at how many consumers are there of that product. I'll look at demand. And I will manufacture things according to that demand. Isn't that commonsensical? But if you were living in 1970s or 80s, what could be the situation at that time? Suppose if I am businessman, suppose if I own, manufacturing unit or scooters, let's say, because most of the time they were, having scooters only at that time. I should be looking at the demand, but it was not happening at that time. There was license, quota, permit, Raj. It means that if there is a demand of 1,000 scooters, I have to take permission from government to manufacture 1,000 scooters. But if government has set the quota of 100 scooters for me, I cannot produce more than 100 scooters. This is what a socialist economy is. And of course, there are various strands involved in that. I'll not go into the details. But the point here is that free market was not there. Socialist economy was there. Everything was determined by government, not by the free play of demand and supply as we understand it today. And because of lot of government intervention in all these businesses, we could not produce the quality product that is required to be exported. Now, at that time we had only growth rate of 2% or 3%, and it was called Hindu economic growth rate. Why? Because it was targeted that Hindus are incapable of producing anything of a standard, or they do not have enterprising spirit, they do not have business senses, they cannot become head of multinational companies, let's say. Now after 30 years, when all Indians are gaining top position, look how we were portrayed in 70s, 80s, 90s, even till 20 years back. So that is also very important, because when India will grow economically, we will all together go economically, then we'll all have self-confidence within ourselves. But at the same time, as Venugopalji is asking, besides this contribution, what values in 21st century, what will be valuable in 21st century is what original ideas you are coming up with. What discoveries, innovations, new things you can bring. Because that is the most valuable thing when it comes to modern economy.
Yes, there I would like to frame it as a question. And not
Right,
like a-
right.
So, I mean, all of us here, all the students here, including us, like I said, take pride in an Indian origin person outside reaching a high position, doing the great things. And so, coming back to us, what about, again, it is a slight repetition of the previous question, but what about the colonized education will not allow Indians receiving Indian education to be like them?
They cannot do that. Look, on global platform, when equal exchanges are happening, you have to give something when you're taking something. Only then you will be considered as equal. Suppose if I am borrowing you repeatedly for many years, will you consider me as your equal partner? Or will you consider me always as inferior? Because I'm always borrowing from you. So look at Indians, what they have been doing for last 50 to 60 or 70 years. Because they have lost the self-confidence of producing anything of their own original. They believe that whatever other countries are offering, that's the best and bring it here. That's what in very humorous way Kapil Kapoor ji calls it, that we have brought Katura culture. So we have that Katura and we go to different countries and we beg from them. Okay, give us this and give us this, and then come here and make mixture out of that and would like to implement here. So we have become beggars. And we take pride in becoming beggars. Now any civilization worth of his salt, worth of his own identity, and respect that. And you're talking about self-respect. Can any self-respect person surrender its intellect or its identity to other nation so much? And now the crucial stage has come. Why? Because India is economically growing. We are making marks. And people across the globe are expecting from us to contribute not only economically, but also to contribute in terms of ideas and innovations and new frameworks. So that's why my question was related to that. We hear a lot of ideas coming from the West and we say that, this is brilliant idea, this is brilliant framework. Okay, whether it's coming in physics or mathematics or biological sciences, what I'm saying is using any indigenous model, any indigenous framework, could we contribute in the last 50 years anything on global platform? Because if that could have been the goal of colonized education, but where is the contribution of Indians on the global platform? So here we need to understand that you will not be taken very seriously, as Arvindanji was also telling, that we are only becoming software coolies. We are only remaining clerks. Despite of that 21st century, everyone is predicting across the globe that China and India is going to become superpower again. And that is happening after almost 250 years. Because before 250 years, India and China had dominant share of GDP, of world GDP. So, try to understand this, that to decolonize India's education, we need to understand what are our inherent strengths. It's not that we can claim, and we can start boasting about every field. And that's here I would like to bring two symptoms, that you see in colonized mind. What happens is when you get colonized, the one that we have been discussing for last, couple of minutes, that you start feeling inferior, backward, primitive, and you think that you are of no use or no value. That's what colonized education make you think. But another thing also, the other symptom that comes is that we start boasting and exaggerating without being evaluating what's the reality. So we start telling that we had also aeroplanes, we also had nuclear bombs. We also had all these innovations and discoveries. Our people had done it 1,000 years back. Now we become laughing stock if we do not really know our history and the tradition and the knowledge system very well. So this boasting should not be there, This exaggeration should not be there, as well as the inferiority complex of we as primitive and barbarians should not be there. So let's go and become pragmatic where our inherent strength lies and where we can contribute.
Yeah, I think, and in addition to that, we find that, on the one side, the students getting education here are becoming, as you said, software coolies or clerks. They might be looking like scientists, as Saravanan sir said, they might be scientific clerks itself. So, and you find the other way also, that is, they don't get the education here, and there is a natural flow for anyone who takes a graduation or a schooling here. They try to get their post-graduation or doctoral studies from universities outside. They want to go there for better education. So that flow is also there.
Yes.
And you see that people who go out there like that are able to make it better and are more successful in our definitions of success. So coming back to our education, what can change in our education, or when we say decolonizing Indian education, what does it actually mean, and how will it bring those factors here? Anyone who graduates from in India from an Indian university or takes a doctoral degree from here, how do they become as good as what we see outside, and what is the change that we need to bring in here?
I think that is going to be the major challenge for us in 21st century, and it's a very huge task at national level. But of course we have started seeing the advances made in that direction, and of course, as I said in the beginning also, that Amrita University is playing a big role in that also. Okay, so let's try to understand how we do that. It's simply, first of all, if you understood the diagnosis very well, that there is something deeply wrong if we do not value our own indigenous knowledge system and do not incorporate that, we will remain alienated to our own self. We will remain a stranger to our own identity. So, practically, I'll say here, because the government has started taking steps into that direction, so let me introduce and some of things you're already doing here. Best is to incorporate Indian knowledge system into mainstream education system. And what this Indian knowledge system is, and let me correlate that with what you're saying about the best practices in the Western countries. So what happened is that suppose you are studying in first year, let's say first semester student, second semester, whatever subjects you are studying, whether it's sciences or humanities or any other area, in between that. First year, you must be taught about the fundamental ideas of your own civilization. Because all other ideas, whether in terms of sciences, architecture, anthropology, sociology, anywhere, that subject is grounded in fundamental ideas of that civilization. Now this is not new thing. This is what West called the core curriculum. What it is called? The core curriculum. So in Western university, even before the leftists began to hijack American university there, all universities in America were teaching the core curriculum to their first year students at least, and which consists of all the great ideas, all great thinkers, all great books that came out from the Western tradition, that was taught to these students of first year as course module. Why? Because any idea of any subject you take, they are grounded in that civilizational ethos and civilizational framework. That's why when you read any textbook, you'll find that Aristotle, Plato, Socrates are mentioned. Why there is a need for that? Why not talk about, from the recent discoveries and advances? Because they would like to build the argument that these are not recent advances. This is something our civilization has been doing for thousands of years. So the Western countries have found a way to integrate core curriculum into their mainstream education, and no one is objecting to that. Even everyone is taking pride into that. And it expands their horizon also. They'll come to understand whatever bits and pieces, ideas they are understanding, how it is connected to their history, their philosophy, their larger cultural tradition and intellectual tradition. And this is same that we are trying to bring through Indian knowledge system also. For us, Indian knowledge system is our core curriculum. Indian knowledge system gives you an idea, let's say in first year or second year, that what great ideas, and that's the effort you made in book also, and I'll connect that psychologically with colonization at individual level. What great ideas in India came? If I ask students today, okay, you tell me 5 great ideas that India gave to the world. Besides zero, because that has been popularized by movies, okay. What other 4 are? And if I tell you, okay, tell me about the 15 flaws that you find in Indian society, I'll get 50. Because, all the problems that you see around, that you see that because this is, India, we are Indians, we keep blaming, we keep going guilt trip. And someone wrote it very wisely, that guilt is the weapon of mass destruction for Indian society. Because once you are gone into guilt of having your identity as something you blame to, then you cannot come out of as an original person. So you try to understand that you need to understand what great ideas came out of India. You need to understand what great writers came out of India, or thinkers, let's say. What great books came out of India. In fact, it is so pathetic today that even to mention 5 or 10 books of India's intellectual tradition, very few people can tell what these 5 books or 5 great authors are. So at least when you're talking about the Western practices, you go in any country which is developed, let's say according to our modern parameter, which take pride in its identity, they will teach to their student in schools and colleges the collective intellectual tradition that they've inherited from centuries. If we cannot do that, then we'll be failing in our duty in integrating that. So how we did, and maybe the the practices that we started, and you have also started here, is first year student must be taught about the core foundational ideas of India. Maybe 30 lectures, 60 lectures in 2 semesters. Then from second semesters onward, second, third or fourth, or post-graduation also. I'm not talking about schools here because we are sitting in college campus here. Suppose you are studying in architecture college. One module in second semester should be compulsorily of what Indic ideas are related to architecture in your curriculum. If you are studying management, then one module of Indic management should be there. And of course, we are not disturbing the other modules. Keep that 90% course as it is. So we are not saying that throughout all the Western framework and bring the Indian. That's not possible, not practical, and that has never been Indic approach also. Okay. At least one module in each semester for the remaining semesters will make them aware that what has been our collective inheritance when it comes to that particular field. And remember, India is 10,000 years old civilization. It's not new nation. We have experimented a lot. We have given framework in all disciplines, whether it's come to, you take up any subject and you just, historically recall who started that subject or who wrote first thing on that subject, the name will come, Indian name will come in front. You talk about the political studies. Who's the first name will come in your mind? Arthashastra. Okay. You talk about language studies. I'm not only talking about India, across the globe. If the real historical map is designed, all the original thinkers came from India. Forget about the modern subjects where I'm not claiming that India gave everything. I'm not saying that whatever advances are made in physics or mathematics, it is given by India. I'm saying originally you look at, there are a lot of texts, there are a lot of thinkers, goes back to 5,000 years, 3,000 years, 2,000 years. Okay. So this is how, step by step, we can integrate Indian knowledge system into, and Indian knowledge system is the key to decolonize India's education. Without disrupting, without interfering, without asking too much, we are just asking space for 10% of Indian knowledge system respective to that expertise area. And we have seen the changes happening when students come to know about their own cultural heritage.
That makes a lot of sense to say. Before winding up, maybe can you talk about a practical, how it would look in a practical sense when something comes out from a decolonized framework as against a colonized framework?
So, okay, let me give you pointers to that. Okay. Yes. So, I found very interesting framework, and I'm giving you that as pointers also. Please write it down. Please have your pen and paper ready. This will be very useful. How to study society from decolonized framework. So I'm giving you, I initially thought about 5, but then after discussing with Arvindanji, there's 6B. B, alphabet B, 6B I'm going to talk about. If you go into any society, what 6 things you must study to understand the indigenous, the local, and the things that you see around that society and how to study that society. If you look from colonized framework, first of all, you will find that all indigenous societies are worthless. They have never produced anything worthwhile. So there's no use of studying them. That has been colonial approach. That's why they were never interested in local solutions. They said that we have found ultimate solutions and we are ready to give to you, accept that and integrate that. Forget about what you have been practicing. In contrast to that, what has been the decolonizing approach? So the first B is, let's suppose you go in any society or any country, or any community, let's say. How will you, first thing what you will study in that community? That first B is Bhasha, language. Maybe if I'll get time, I'll tell you what's the importance of language. Or maybe with one example, I'll tell you. Let's take a look at 2 words, festival and Utsav. Utsav, you understand word Utsav? Festival, what's the root word of festival? It's related to feast. It's related to eating food and dawat, enjoying things. Now, what's etymological or the root word of Utsav? Utsava. Fountain of joy is coming out, yes. Of course, you know that very well because you're coming from Sanskrit background. So you're right, sir. Definitely you're right. But you just go to the root word. I'm giving you the contrasting example that how language can shape your perception. We don't have much time, but I'll take 1 or 2 examples. What's the root word for Utsav? The root word of Utsav is related to elevating consciousness. What it is? Elevating consciousness. So look at the one word that you're using, festival, you'll always think about food. Because ultimately you have to feast. And that's the way to enjoy festival. But look at the Indian word, Sanskrit word, and that is Utsav. Utsav means when the consciousness is getting elevated. It means you eat less food. You get in practices that can purify your mind, that can elevate your consciousness, so that can give you better perception and cognition of things. Okay, let me give you one more example. Okay, alphabet as compared to Varna. We call our letter as Varna Mala, right? So Varna is there. Varna is equivalent to, let's say, alphabet or corresponds to alphabet. Alphabet is derived from which? Alpha and beta. So 2 initial letters that we get in Greek. What about Varna? What insights you get when you say that you are learning Varna Mala or Varna Akshar or? No, Varna is not expression. Varna is also used as Varna Jati, right? That Arvindanji was talking about. But then what this Varna Jati is doing here in alphabet and letters? Classification. Okay, you are closer. You are closer. You are interested in knowing? So one is a spectrum. It's a spectrum of color as well as a spectrum of various talents, temperaments that you see in society. And then you categorize them according to their temperament, inclination, and sanskar. Now just think about, and this spectrum is not only of word, this is spectrum of sound also. So one gives you deeper insight of how to look at the reality, look at it as a continuum, because a spectrum is continuum. Of course, for our understanding, we categorize that, but it is about continuity. Now, when you say alphabet, you are getting no deeper insight about language. But when you say Varn, you are getting deeper insight about many layered things there. Of course, there are many. I'll not go into that. But you just think about grammar versus Vyakaran. You think about new moon versus Amavasya. Why it is called Amavasya? And why not something like, maybe Naya Chandrama. Okay, something like that. Health versus Swasth. Okay. And vernacular versus Prakrit. What I'm saying is, when you go and study society, language play a very important role in shaping the thinking. Okay, I have 2-3 minutes, then I'll quote one person. So this I give an example from Sanskrit. Let me give you example from Native Americans. Okay. In Native Americans, one writer, I brought the book also. Okay. Because I want to show you that lot of good works can come out if we use indigenous approach, sciences, and bringing out amalgamation of that. So she is Robin Wall Kimmer, and she has written this wonderful work on ecology. So those who are students of biology, chemistry, and ecology in nature, you must read this. Braiding Sweetgrass and Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants. Now, when she is comparing English language with her own Native American language, she says that in English, you always use word it for something inanimate. Okay, so there is masculine thing, then feminine thing, and then there is it is there. And it is largely used as a classification for plants, for animals, even for babies. She is arguing and she is saying that if you use it for all these what we think as living being, vibrating with life, as inanimating thing, then what will be your approach to deal with them? You will think them as resources to be consumed. So she compared and contrasted that with Native American language, where no plant is given the status of it, no animal is pronounced as it. Then you must be wondering what they call it, right? So there must be some inanimate things. So according to their definition or their worldview, everything that is created by human is it. Everything that is created by consciousness itself, that is, Leela or play that we call. Now what she writes, look at this, I'm quoting her. If a tree, rock, mountain is it, we can take up the chainsaw. We are ready to cut them. If a maple is tree, if maple is her, because she is designating as a feminine feature, prakriti or something, we think twice. This is what language can do to you. If language can bring deeper perception of things around you, you will look at things from different angle. So coming to our 6B, the first is language. Do not underestimate the power of language. India has invested heavily in language. Every language, each language gives you perception of that world, how that community has looked at that world. Okay, and that is valuable. And second B is bhusha, that is dress. Second is bhusha. So you go around and move and you see that what kind of clothes they are wearing. But now in modern days, we are all wearing shirts and pants, whether we are living in cold area or hot area or anywhere. But if you have that common sense or indigenous wisdom left, then you will see the variety. And look, when we say that what you find most valuable in India, you say that unconsciously the diversity. But that diversity is built because of uncolonized or decolonized framework, not through colonized framework. The third one is bhushan, that is ornament. Ornament means here the whole Shringar thing is sculpture and related areas of art. Okay. So the third thing that you look around is, how this society has created the concept of beauty. Okay. Aesthetics. How do they come up with the product that are beautiful to look at and that are practically can be used. So bhasha, language, bhusha, dress, bhushan, ornament. Now can you tell me one more? Bhakshan. I'll come. That is closer to. Anyone from you? Suppose you are going into new community and society. If you are not colonized in your framework, then what you will see? One is bhavan, architecture. You will see that how they have built, forts, palaces, or how have they built their houses, common houses, temples, even city plans, how they are laid out. Where are forests in that? Where is, ecological systems are kept around, how the whole city plan, how it is built, how it is grown. Even very simple things can be observed and learned through architecture only. And I quoted Time magazine that what we are doing through colonized mind through our architecture. Fifth one is bhishaj. So bhishaj is food, as you're saying rightly, medicine, and all herbal things that you see around yourself. Because in Ayurveda, food is medicine. Plants are medicine. So look at, from Indic framework. So bhishaj is food, medicine, plants, and the whole ecosystem around you. And the last one is, of course I had 5, but Arvindanji very rightfully reminded me that the one, what you will look, let's say you go into any community. There are some core areas, some fundamental things that they do not allow everyone to touch or to go or to, interfere. Or maybe they value it most. So I call it the sacred, the concept of sacred. The concept of sacred is space. The concept of, let's say, because we have to go by B model, so it could be Bhagwan. Okay. So the sacredness, how do they view sacredness? And look, it matters most. If you see Prakriti, as I was telling about, as inanimate thing, then you will exploit it. If you think that God is sitting somewhere in 7th heaven, and this is something polluted and corrupted world, then you will see this world as only as something very transitory place, and you can consume it. So that is sacredness, the concept of sacredness will define how do you see the reality around you and what's the ultimate goal of life. Why they are doing festival, why the rituals are important. Ultimately, the whole purpose of life is connected to what do you consider. Do you consider you will get eternal heaven or eternal hell, or you can gain moksha in this life only? So all things around that make sense. So I think these 6B, please use them whenever you are moving around and doing a study and trying to understand society through decolonized framework.
Yes, I think we got a comprehensive picture of what decolonization means and what it feels like maybe, and practically what it looks like maybe. So I think we are a little bit late.
Late already.
Anybody, I think we can take one question and the rest of you can ask personally, if at all there is.
Touching on the third way of colonization, you talked about the colonization of communism and socialism, right? Now we've progressed to the age of capitalism, as we say, and I find it that we are more indoctrinated by Western ideas through capitalism than we have been in socialism and communism. So what can we do to what has capitalism achieved in cases of like decolonizing us? Say, and I find it that we are more indoctrinated by Western ideas through capitalism than we have been in socialism and communism. So, what can we do to what has capitalism achieved in cases of like decolonizing us compared to?
So you're saying, is it right model to follow after communism that we can go and follow capitalism?
Yes.
Right? You have very important question, and you look at the framework. Whenever we are given option, it is always given in binary. Okay, whether it's capitalism or communism. Only thing is, when I ask this question to the great experts also, have we ever thought that we have our own economic model or business model existing or not? Because we have been following the West. West earlier came up with communist model. Of course, they also came up with capitalist model. But we blindly followed Russia and started following the socialist model. We thought that it will take us to heaven on earth. And there is no flaw in that. And we blindly imitated that. And I shared that with you that we had this, bankruptcy. The problem with capitalism is again coming in front of us again and again. Whether in the form of recession, whether in the form of natural destruction of the resources around us, or the way it has disrupting community and the family life, both. Only solution that I can give you right now is, when you're decolonized, you do not go by one model. You explore all kinds of models that are existing in society. And that is a more scientific approach, because if you look at the evolutionary perspective, then every society has its own way of arranging its resources, managing it, and bringing out best. So Indic approach is never to follow any standardized approach given from top to bottom as something solution for all remedies. So this I will say only, that as we had committed a big blunder when we blindly followed communism, we'll also come into the trap if we'll blindly follow the capitalism. We need to come up with our own indigenous models, and for that we need to understand what those models are. So no one can resolve our own problem. We have to find our own diagnosis and our own problem. So capitalism cannot be, but it's much better than communism, let me tell you, but it has its own problems. We should search our own Indic economic model. That's why I was talking about integrating Indic model of business, economy and management in management colleges. Because till they are not taught about these models, they'll not understand whether we have something to offer to the world or not. Okay, thank you for this question. Thank you.
Learn something, or whenever you are reading something, you are thinking about the practical usage. So now English is seen as a global language, the West is seen as the model. So how won't that be a challenge? This utilitarian approach be a challenge for our decolonization?
That is already a challenge. Look, even after 75 years, I told you that we are discussing about decolonization. That shows that that is deep gone into our bones. But understand this, and I think if students were there, maybe few of them are there. I think rest of Indian society is not colonized. 70 to 80% of our people, those who did not become victim of Indian education, okay, they are still decolonized. So the best thing is to go to society and learn from them. The case would have been worse if the whole society would have been colonized. So the case is, what happened with Europe? Who colonized Europe? Christianity colonized Europe so thoroughly that they no longer identify themselves as pagan or the earlier civilization which they were taking pride. Look at the Middle East countries. Islam colonized them so thoroughly that they have forgotten their own original past and all that. But in India, this has not happened. Of course, despite of all our education system efforts of colonizing us, our 80% society is still decolonized. So the only solution is go to the larger Indic community that is there and learn from them. They will teach you a lot of things which can be useful. And of course, along with community, we have our Shastras intact. Whether it's Itihas, whether it's Itihas Purana, whether it's Ved, whether it's, all philosophical systems, though we could not progress in last 100 years in that area. But still, if you look at the content that has been passed from generation to generation in India, it is unparalleled. Okay, so two anchors are there. One is society, go back to that society again. They will teach you what is Indic way. And second is take anchor of our classical studies in Shastra. I think sooner or later we can come out of this challenge very well.
When you talked about the Native American children being taken, right, and forcefully away from the parents, and you said that it didn't happen in India. Actually, it happened in India. Most of us are not aware of it. Those communities that were branded as criminal jatis and criminal tribes, government had actually in the constitution there was a provision, and by that provision the children can be should be forcibly, not must, maybe, should be forcibly taken away from the parents. They should be put in schools, and the schools were run by Salvation Army, missionaries, and they had to do forcible labor there because the theology was that labor was given as a punishment for sin, and as these children are basically racially, ethnically, they are more towards sin because they are criminal case. They should be given more hard work. So they were made to dig wells, build the compounds, everything. When the Canada government and you remember that Canada native children, the mass graves were found, etc., etc. Then they started digging into this. A lot of children had died, but their own communities, for example, Color community in Tamil Nadu, Pardis in Maharashtra, and Lambadis in this Rajputana, those areas. A lot of communities have lost their children, but none of them even know about it. A few of the educated people there, the socially aware people, they think that the missionaries actually did a good thing by giving them education. So this is colonization over colonization, that they start thinking that what the missionaries did were good. At least the Native Americans, they have realized that what the missionaries did was a genocide. Here we are not even aware of it. Perhaps we should take
That's very important addition, because I was not aware that in India they could go to such an extreme. But contrast that with slow poison that we are given. In fact, we are not aware of that slow poison, because if it is given in extreme dose at some point of time, we could have realized. But the way it has been given in 200 years through mainstream education system, we are still struggling to come out. Thank you for that addition. Thank you.
Somebody.
Presents the philosophical interpretation of the people who lived here, who probably know this land better than the other people. So that forms a major reason and a more sensible thought to instill in the current generation. So my question is, if the first generation explores and second generation takes that education, does somewhere the self-respect in the second or the third generation, which is getting the indigenous education, goes down? The exploration with rationality is far more higher than the exploration done by the sages or the ancient Indian philosophers. They have more self-worth than the second and third generation. So this indigenous education which you are instilling is for what? Is for self-respect building or for decreasing inferiority complex?
As I said that, first of all, as an individual, what is most valuable to you is exploring your own true identity. Okay? Because that will keep you in harmony with yourself. Collectively, this exploration will help us psychologically, first of all, as you are saying, that it will make us aware that we should not feel inferior. We should not in any way feel that we have not contributed in any area. So that facts are there, first of all. Okay, that will make you take pride in your own country. But that's not the shallow pride we are talking about, because every civilization has gone through its own achievements and downfalls and all that. So it's not historical record to be kept in museum and to be reminded day and again and again. That's not the purpose of decolonizing Indian education only. Because this is living tradition, as compared to other tradition that has vanished from our planet. So living tradition means in all these areas you see the continuous tradition transmitting from generation to generation. If you really take a look at, the studies or disciplines of music or dance or the art form, who's keeping them survive? Despite of colonized education, they could survive through society's mechanism. So what happens is you gain new perspective when you study from indigenous angle. And there are various contributions you can make. I could not take the name of people. Let me give you an example of Manjul Bhargav. Okay. You know about Manjul Bhargav? So Manjul Bhargav's topmost mathematician, he won this field medal in 2017, which is equal to Nobel Prize. He made fundamental discovery in mathematics. And he owes that discovery to his training in Sanskrit poetry. Though he was born and brought up in US only, okay, but his grandfather was in Rajasthan, Jaipur, Sanskrit teacher. He used to come there, so summer vacation, and learn, all these Sanskrit texts from him. And later on, subconsciously, whatever insights he was getting through the Sanskrit studies, that helped ultimately him in finding or do the major discoveries in mathematics. So when I'm saying that decolonization, it's not about remembering facts and data about how we were great at one point of time. It's about looking at the deeper insights that all disciplines has given to, has contributed in that field. If suppose this one example can help us understand that deeper frameworks, whether it comes to poetry, whether it comes to philosophy, whether it comes to psychology, whether it comes in architecture, you'll find that abundant material is there for us to contribute on a global scale. Okay, this is recent example. So he brought self-respect. He does not have this inferiority complex, and at the same time he can contribute at par on global scale. So this kind of framework we need to develop over the period of time, because we are living tradition and we are not reciting the facts of 2000 years just to memorize them and to pass on like museum. That has never been the case of Indic approach. Okay.
I just wanted to add to your point about Srinivasa Ramanujan.
Yes.
Like how from the tradition that wisdom evolved, and he owes all his contributions to the Namagiritaya. So I just wanted to add.
So let me add one more thing here also.
Yes, sure.
Because I come from language studies, and earlier I was not aware that all linguistic insights that came in last 200 or 250 years, whether it's in all areas of linguistics, whether it's in phonetics, syntax or semantics, this has originally come from Sanskrit studies. So I'm talking about people who were influenced by Panini's grammar, Bhartari's Vakyapadhi, and all this oral tradition of the sound, the science of sound. So the major insights of India, Indic insights, were adopted by those people who came here, and they used that insight to develop that subject. So even the whole linguistic study owes its origin to India only, even the modern linguistic studies. And that has never been taught how it is passed on even in modern times. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. It was a very thought-provoking session, and I'm sure all the students who left the hall left thinking. So as a token of our respect and admiration for your work, we have a small memento. I request Hari sir to present it.